Fresh hope for the denuclearization of North Korea. Chinese President Xi Jinping's first ever visit to Pyongyang this week is raising hope a much-needed breakthrough could be on the horizon. North Korea diplomacy at the lower level as Seoul's top nuclear envoy prepares to fly to Washington for talks with his American counterpart on the regime's denuclearization. Plus, ousted Egyptian President Mohammed Morsi has died after collapsing in a courtroom in Cairo. The 67-year-old was attending his espionage trial when he blacked out and died. Now, getting ready to roll out the red carpet in a big way. North Korea and China have both announced that Chinese President Xi Jinping will visit Pyongyang on a state visit this week. His two-day visit from Thursday to Friday will be the first to North Korea by any Chinese leader in 14 years. Could it be a signal of a breakthrough in the denuclearization deadlock with the G20 summit just a matter of days away? Our Go Do-hoon starts us off.
Amid the deadlock in denuclearization talks between Pyongyang and Washington, the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China revealed on Monday that Chinese leader Xi Jinping will visit the North from June 20th to the 21st. North Korea state media also confirmed the visit.
At the invitation of Kim Jong-un, chairman of the Workers' Party of Korea and chairman of the State Affairs Commission of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Chinese President Xi Jinping will pay a state visit to our country from June 20th to 21st.
This will mark President Xi's first trip to North Korea since he came to power in 2012. The last Chinese leader to visit the North was Hu Jintao in 2005. Chinese state media reports the visit marks the 70th anniversary of China and North Korea establishing diplomatic ties and will further contribute to improving bilateral relations. As for the rough itinerary, the two leaders are not only expected to discuss related issues but also participate in activities such as visiting the Sino-North Korean Friendship Tower in Pyeongyang. This monument commemorates Chinese soldiers who fought alongside North Koreans during the Korean War. The visit comes after North Korea's denuclearization talks with the U.S. collapsed dramatically in Hanoi earlier this year. An analyst told the South China Morning Post on Monday that the visit has great geopolitical significance and will allow Beijing to continue to play an important role in Korean Peninsula affairs. It's also worth noting that the meeting in North Korea will take place a week before the G20 summit in Japan, where U.S. President Donald Trump and President Xi are expected to meet amid the escalating trade tensions between the two countries. 고르니, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, South Korea is hopeful the Chinese leader's visit to North Korea will help efforts towards denuclearization and peace here on the Korean Peninsula. In a statement on Monday, the presidential office said Seoul has been aware of President Xi's intent to make a state visit to North Korea since last week. It said Seoul has been cooperating with Beijing in the belief President Xi's visit will contribute to the peaceful resolution of Korean Peninsula issues. Both sides have agreed to hold bilateral talks, that is South Korea and China, at the G20 summit in Osaka next week, but the specifics are still being ironed out. However, the top office said there are no plans for a separate trip to Seoul by President Xi before or after the G20 summit. Now, responding to news of President Xi's upcoming visit to North Korea, the United States has reiterated that its goal remains the final, fully verified denuclearization of North Korea. The White House said the world remains focused on getting the North to abandon its nuclear weapons. The remark highlights the Trump administration's ongoing pressure campaign against the North, while reminding North Korean leader Kim Jong-un of the denuclearization pledge he made to President Trump during their first summit in Singapore last year. And as you'd expect, the international community is paying keen attention to the announcement of the Chinese leader's planned visit to North Korea. Media outlets from around the world were quick to report the news of President Xi's upcoming trip to Pyongyang. And many had their own take on why it's happening now. Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
International media outlets are sharply focused on the news that Chinese President Xi Jinping will visit North Korea this week. They are interested to see what role Beijing will play, especially against a backdrop of prolonged China-U.S. trade tensions and stalled denuclearization negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington. The Washington Post explained that President Xi's visit will mark diplomatic history for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un following the North Korea-U.S. summit in Hanoi in February, which ended prematurely with no deal. Citing experts, it also said the visit could be a sign that Beijing's will to impose continued sanctions against the North is waning amid its continued standoff with Washington over trade. The New York Times described President Xi's visit to Pyongyang as a surprise move, shortly ahead of the G20 summit in Osaka, where the leaders of China and the U.S. are likely to meet. Citing Chinese analysts, the report says Xi's visit could revive the disarmament talks between Trump and Kim, while noting that Beijing remains Pyongyang's most important ally. CNN and the Associated Press also reported on President Xi's scheduled visit, which coincides with the 70th anniversary of the establishment of ties between Pyongyang and Beijing. Japan's Kyodo News Agency forecasts Xi and Kim will discuss measures to seek a breakthrough in stalled denuclearization talks, as well as ways to cooperate economically. It also explained the two allies will showcase their traditional friendly ties while intensifying strategic solidarity. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's top nuclear envoy is scheduled to fly to the United States in the coming hours for North Korea-related talks with his American counterpart. Seoul's foreign ministry says Lee Do-hoon, special representative for Korean Peninsula peace and security affairs, will leave for Washington on this Tuesday. Lee and U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun will address the Atlantic Council East Asia Foundation Strategic Dialogue on Wednesday, marking the first time that the two envoys will speak on the same stage. His visit comes amid an impasse in the denuclearization negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington. Now, in other news, a reform-minded investigator has been tapped to lead South Korea's prosecution. Yoon Seok-yeol played a key role in the probe into the former Park Geun-hye administration's huge corruption scandal. Getting us better acquainted with President Moon's nominee is our Shin Se-min.
President Moon Jae-in's pick for the Prosecutor General is Yoon Seok-yeol, a nomination signaling sweeping reforms at the nation's law enforcement agency. Despite President Moon taking a day off after his week-long trip to Scandinavia, the top office announced a decision on Monday, adopting the proposal made by the Justice Minister earlier in the day. The reason behind the nomination, Yoon's unshakable principles.
The nominee for Prosecutor General has worked to eradicate corruption while serving as a prosecutor. He has also shown that he's an upright individual who isn't swayed by other authorities.
The top office added that the nominee has shown excellent leadership and resolve for reform while serving as the chief of the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office. The nomination of a new chief prosecutor comes as the Moon administration continues its readjustment of power and authority of the nation's prosecution and police, and Yoon's nomination is interpreted as a show of the administration's strong will to continue its reform drive. The nominee has been the chief of Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office, the largest prosecution office in the country since 2017. Yoon's resume includes high-profile investigations, including the massive power abuse scandal involving the former President Park Geun-hye and her longtime friend Choi Soon-sil. He also led a probe into suspicions that the country's intelligence service intervened in the 2012 presidential election. If appointed, Yoon becomes the first chief prosecutor with no experience of heading the High Prosecutor's Office since Korea introduced fixed tenures for prosecution chiefs in the late 1980s, and will replace Moon Moo-il, who is scheduled to retire next month. The nominee will have to go through a parliamentary hearing, but the position does not require lawmakers' approval. 신세민, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that, President Moon's nomination of Yoon Seok-yeol for Prosecutor General was met, as you probably expect, with a mixed reaction at South Korea's National Assembly. The ruling party said Yoon is the perfect pick for the role. The main opposition party is not so sure, claiming his confirmation would erode the prosecution's neutrality. Kim Min-ji reports.
The ruling Democratic Party welcomed Yoon Seok-yeol's nomination as Prosecutor General, saying that he is fit to carry out sweeping reforms. The party noted that Yoon had dealt with all sorts of bribery and corruption cases, and that he is known for not being swayed and sticking to principles even under external pressure.
We believe he is the perfect pick to conclude investigations into rooting out corruption and power abuse and to lead the prosecution on a future-oriented path.
Yoon's nomination is seen as a major shakeup because there are other officials who've been in the service longer than him. The outgoing Prosecutor General Moon Mo-il also joined the prosecution 5 years earlier than Yoon. There's speculation the prosecutor is more senior than Yoon may resign after his appointment, given the long-held culture of seniority within the prosecution. The main opposition Liberty Korea party lashed out, saying that the Moon Jae-in administration has picked someone from its own side and that the prosecution will go on the warpath against opposition figures.
As soon as the Moon administration came into power, Yoon was elevated to head of Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office and launched course of probes of opposition figures. The prosecution has long lost political neutrality and independence in investigations.
Yoon was part of the special prosecutor's team that investigated the Parview scandal involving ousted former President Park Geun-hye, while the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office, headed by Yoon, also investigated former President Lee Myung-bak and former Supreme Court Chief Yang Seung-tae. Following the nomination, Yoon said he feels great responsibility, but did not comment on pending issues, such as diluting the investigative powers of the prosecution or plans to establish an independent body to probe allegations involving top government officials.
I feel a heavy responsibility. I ask for your support and I will prepare for my role as well.
Yoon's confirmation hearing, when it takes place, is likely to be a tough one, with rival parties expected to clash hard over his credentials. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, average spending by international tourists to South Korea has decreased steadily over the past 12 months, according to research conducted by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and the Korea Tourism Organization. Foreign tourists spent an average of $1,300 per trip in the first quarter of this year. This is a 12% drop compared to the same period last year and the fourth straight quarterly decline. Industry experts attribute the falling numbers to Beijing's ban on Chinese group tourists to South Korea following Seoul's deployment of the US missile defense system. Now, former Egyptian President Mohammed Morsi has collapsed and died while on trial in a Cairo courtroom. He was Egypt's first democratically elected president back in 2012, but was overthrown by the military just 1 year later. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Hong Yu. So fill us in on the cause of Morsi's death and why exactly he was on trial.
Well, Mark, Morsi suffered a heart attack during a trial for an espionage case that took place in Cairo on Monday. Morsi was addressing the court and spoke for 5 minutes before he fainted and fell into a coma, according to Egypt State TV. When he arrived at the hospital, he was already dead. He had been in prison since 2013 when he was ousted by the military following massive protests against his rule. A strict Islamist and senior member of the Muslim Brotherhood, Morsi was voted into power in June 2012, the election that was the apex of Arab Spring uprising. After Morsi was ousted, he received multiple prison sentences on various politicized charges, including conspiring with Palestinian group Hamas, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and other foreign organizations. Human rights groups have questioned Morsi's prison conditions and criticized the medical care he received. Last year, a group of British lawmakers reviewing his treatment concluded the prison was inadequately managing his diabetes and liver disease. They also said he was being treated inhumanely. Morsi was also denied access to communicate with the outside world. During his 6 years in prison, he was only allowed 3 visits. The Muslim Brotherhood released a statement on Monday that said it held Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his regime accountable for killing Morsi and demanded an independent review into the circumstances of his death. The Pentagon announced on Monday that the U.S. will send 1,000 additional troops to the Middle East amid rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran. The extra troops had been requested by U.S. Central Command to address air, naval, and ground-based threats in the Middle East, according to Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan. The decision comes after last week's attack on 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman that the U.S. blamed on Iran. Following Tehran's announcement on Monday that it will increase its stock of enriched uranium over the limit set by its 2015 nuclear deal within 10 days, the U.S. National Security Council said that this was nuclear blackmail that must be met with increased international pressure. Despite a horde of angry protesters surrounding Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam's office on Monday, China says she will remain in her position as chief executive and will not be allowed to step down. For more on the unrest in Hong Kong that was sparked by a controversial extradition bill, Lee Do-hoon reports.
Protest organizers in Hong Kong say almost 2 million people turned out on Sunday to demand the island's chief executive Carrie Lam step down in what's becoming the most significant challenge to China's relationship with the territory since it was handed back by Britain 22 years ago. And on Monday evening, hundreds of protesters gathered by the entrance of Lam's office, again demanding her resignation over a now indefinitely suspended extradition bill that would have allowed Hong Kong citizens to be sent to mainland China for trial.
Oh, we definitely want her to step down because I think the Hong Kong people is not trusting her anymore. So, yeah.
I want to tell everybody we have a freedom of speech to demand the Lam steps down. Because this is Hong Kong, we can show people that this is a city of freedom.
Despite the drumbeat of calls for her resignation, one Chinese official close to the matter said it's not going to happen, adding Lam was appointed by the central government and her position requires a very high level of considered discussion and deliberation in Beijing. However, watchers say Beijing's leaders could eventually consider removing her from office. In 2003, after a massive protest against security laws that were eventually scrapped, Hong Kong's then leader, Tung Chee-hwa, resigned midway into his second term. Despite Beijing's insistence that Lam stay in office, sources say the recent unrest has damaged Lam politically in the eyes of Beijing, and it's highly unlikely she will seek a second term. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Renowned fashion designer, artist, and socialite Gloria Vanderbilt died on Monday at the age of 95. The news of her death was announced by her son, CNN anchor Anderson Cooper. According to Cooper, in his on-air obituary, his mother passed away after a brief battle with stomach cancer. An heiress to a railroad fortune, Vanderbilt later built a fashion empire, designing jeans for women, which were previously made only for men. Vanderbilt died at home with friends and family at her side.
Thank you as always to Hong Yu for the world news there. Now it's time for our Life and Info segment where we focus on information that we hope is useful for your everyday life. And ginseng has been known to strengthen the immune system and relieve fatigue. Now, researchers here in Korea have found that it can also help improve the health of your bones. Park Se-young with more.
After this elderly mouse was given ginseng for 8 weeks, its bone density improved by about 32%. And a group of women who ate 3 grams of ginseng extract every day for 12 weeks were found to have over 10 times the bone hormone osteocalcin and 3 times the calcium of women in the group that was given a placebo.
When fed ginseng, the bone growth biomarker was increased by 11.6 times, or nearly 12 times, compared to the control group.
Ginseng has been approved as a functional ingredient for bone health by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety after clinical trials did not find any adverse side effects. It had previously been approved as a functional ingredient for boosting the immune system and relieving fatigue. Ginseng is less popular than red ginseng because it is thought to have less functions. However, the proven benefits for bone health are expected to help increase the consumption of ginseng.
By confirming beneficial effects on bone health in the clinical trial, ginseng has added bone health improvement to its list of health claims.
The Rural Development Administration believes this will contribute to increased ginseng sales and farm income. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's top internet portal Naver has announced a deal with Japan's Line Pay to offer its mobile payment service in Japan. Naver Pay users visiting Japan can now make payments by reading the QR code at the store or by presenting their own QR codes as they would do with Line Pay. Currently, around 1.6 million stores accept payments through Line Pay. The mobile payment system allows travelers to skip the currency exchange process and save card fees. Naver Pay has 30 million users, which accounts for 58% of the Korean population. Now, the US company Beyond Meat, which makes vegan burgers and sausages, is set to debut a plant-based ground beef. The new type of meat, made from a blend of peas, mung beans and rice proteins, will hit the shelves at US grocery chains, including Whole Foods, from next Monday. According to the company, the new product contains 20 grams of protein per 113 gram serving and becomes marbled and tender when cooked, just like the real thing. With the company's rising popularity, Beyond Meat's stock has soared to about 7 times the price of last month's initial public offering.
Good morning. The capital area had a loud and thundery start to the day. Rain clouds that dropped heavy passing showers are gradually moving away from the peninsula. Meanwhile, Jeju Island has started to receive rainfall, which will likely to continue until the evening. So another band of isolated shower is in the forecast to fall in the upper parts of the country, which will expand to more regions by the evening, while sporadic rain is in the forecast in the Gyeongsang-do provinces. So it's very likely we'll have an evening of thunder and lightning again, and expect to see 20 to 40 millimeters of rainfall, but the showers should start and stop in a short amount of time. But despite showers at times, daily highs will be a tad higher than yesterday, but have a small umbrella handy in case of passing showers. Sporadic rain could linger through tomorrow, and we are expecting frequent showers with readings to hover just above the seasonal average. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Plenty more coming up, including our next newscast at noon Korea time. That's in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.
Cooperation and exchange between Korea and its close allies has been more important than ever. With a focus on international diplomacy, the diplomat seeks to reinforce relationships between Korea and the world. Join us as we connect with foreign ambassadors to better understand Korean politics, economy, culture, and more. The Diplomat.